When trauma happens, it's like a lightning bolt hitting a tree. The entire tree is in survival mode, and it just needs to shut down and take care of what's most important in that moment. The medical system failed my mother, so they failed themselves. They tried their best, and they missed the point. Because what my mother was always looking for was human connections, to be seen, not to be shamed, was to be acknowledged, not to be criticized. And that's a powerful reckoning to see now. I truly believe that we have the capacity to heal ourselves.
This is the Human Future Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and spirituality with some of the world's brightest minds. Together, we paint a vision of the desirable future and discuss the actionable steps to make that vision a reality. And now, without further ado, let's begin. Welcome, Alexandra. Thank you for being here. So the word welcome is the one that's where we start the conversation. So Everything that we say from now on will be part of the episode.
Thank you, Roxana.
Yeah, so thank you for being here. I'm excited to dive into conversation with you and talk about all of the beautiful modalities that you get to share with the world, with your clients, the people. Share a little bit about your story and look at the framework of human future and how do we integrate what you're working on? How do we scale that? How do we potentially utilize technology to bring that to more people? That's the lens, the kind of the angle that I wanted to look at through.
Fantastic.
And why don't we start from you sharing your story? What is your story, Alexandra?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here today.
Great.
It's such a blessing and joy to be able to have this platform. My name is Alexandra, and I was born and raised in Michigan, Michigander native of 30 years. And my story begins there, begins in the Great Lakes State. I was raised by my father and my grandparents. I have two sisters, and I lived on a horse farm for 11 years. And that was a very big contrast to the life that I live today, living on a farm out in the middle of nowhere with 7 acres, 16 horses, and a nonprofit organization called Ride for Fun, which is for special needs individuals to heal through hippotherapy, through horseback equine therapy. And that was a pivotal point in my life, working with special needs individuals, as my sister Alyssa got in a car accident with me and my father when we were very young, and her car seat broke, and she suffered a traumatic brain injury, in which she was the first pediatric case to have a hemispherotomy, which is the cutting of the corpus callosum, the middle communicator between the right and the left hemisphere, to stop a seizure disorder. And it worked, but consequently she became hemiparalyzed on her left side. And my dad was looking for every solution of how can we bring her back? How can we help her to regain mobility and have freedom in her life? And he found his way as a doctor in a suit out to a horse farm. And at the time, he wouldn't even step into the farm. It was too dirty. But then we ended up making that our home. Alyssa found the only kind of therapy that actually helped her, equine therapy, through the sixth sense that horses have, this capacity to sense, to feel beyond language. And that was incredibly life-changing to see my sister go from hemiparalysis on the left-hand side, completely no function of the left arm, the left leg, left side of her face, to now regaining all function except for her left arm. She horseback rides, she bowls, she has an occupation, 3 of them, and now she lives a semi-normal life. And it was through my exposure to my sister Alyssa and the power of the brain to be malleable and the power of our brain to adapt and the power of knowing that she only has half of a brain, and through the malleability of the brain, she gained almost all the function back. That was new and surprising to me as a child. I observed it and I saw it in others. as I worked with special needs individuals. And I was curious, always curious. I played the violin since 5 years old until now. And I also played soccer, and I love to be outside. I love to be in the outdoors. I always loved nature. And I was a very type A individual. I was raised by my dad. Control was very important to me. Being smart and academic was very important to me. It's how I identified myself as an academic, as a musician, as a soccer player. I started to put these own labels on myself. And I also was interested to go to medical school. I knew I wanted to go to the University of Michigan since I was a little girl. That was my dream. Become a doctor, go to the University of Michigan, and specifically study neuroscience, study the brain, study and understand really the intricacies of the human brain, the intricacies of my sister, Alyssa, and how it is she was healing. And that was expansive and very challenging. At the University of Michigan, I felt like a very small minnow in a ginormous ocean. It was a rat race to make relationships with my professors. It was a rat race to compete with my peers. And it was a rat race. It was a lot of competition. And navigating that was interesting and allowed me to find yoga. I really was searching for something to bring me a bit more balance. As a soccer player and an athlete, I tried the gym. I tried to go to the university gyms, a great resource, but I found it wasn't something that aligned with me. The LED lights, the forced air, the also competitive environment in a university coming into the gym just felt very constrictive for me. I had a few girlfriends who invited me to a yoga class, and I hated it. I hated it.
Yeah.
I could barely touch my knees. My fingers could barely touch my knees.
Oh.
Yeah. My mobility and flexibility was 0 to none.
Even though you were an athlete at sport, yeah, you weren't very flexible. Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of cardio and strength, and very little appreciation and mentorship for mobility and flexibility at that time. That was around 2011. And there definitely wasn't an emphasis in my world on those types of movement styles. It was very different for me at the time, something that was never on my radar. So it was the first time I didn't enjoy it too much. I actually didn't go back. I had a very interesting, beautiful experience where I realized I was competing against myself in that yoga room. I was struggling. I was competing against myself. I was looking around me, comparing myself to everybody. And naturally, I felt like a failure. And that was new for me. I was used to not being a failure. So I ran away from it. And I didn't want to sit in that discomfort. And eventually the practice brought me back. And I started to find a community. I started to find people with whom I resonated with their values and their lifestyle more than I did being in a sorority at the University of Michigan. And that was one of the first times that I made a challenging decision to step away from what was comfortable, which was the sorority and my friends that I was associating with, and starting to choose a morning yoga class over a pregame for a football game. Go Blue, University of Michigan. But truly, it was, it felt natural to start choosing my yoga classes over partying. And that naturally separated me from the people with whom I thought was my tribe. Very naturally, though, it magnetized people with whom became my tribe, became my family, became my community. And that was a pivotal part of my life because I started to find a way of movement that was like dance. I didn't grow up dancing. I didn't grow up with exposure to dance. I grew up very uncomfortable with dance, very uncomfortable in my body, very disembodied. The moment I would start dancing, I would be completely in my head. How do I look? Who's looking? X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And when I found yoga, I could close my eyes and feel like a dancer. And I felt like I found my dance. And I was very balancing to the neuroscience piece, the consistently competing with others and my peers to rise to the top. It was exactly what I needed. Junior year came around and I was studying for the MCAT. I just got my first job as a server and was trying to do this work-play balance. Until then, I really hadn't had too many jobs out of babysitting and violin instructing children, horseback riding lessons, things like this.
Mm-hmm.
But being a server was fun and it was exciting. But as a junior, that's when I was visiting Miami on January 1st, 2014. And I received the phone call from my dad saying that my mom had committed suicide and that she died. And I had a very out-of-body experience when I received this phone call. I can feel my heart beat fast right now as I share it. And I just stopped everything I did. Everything seemed like it stopped. I didn't even grab my shoes. I got the phone call. I had a reaction. And then I went out. I was in Miami at the time. And I went and I ran to the beach. And I ran and I ran and I ran and I ran until I couldn't run anymore. And probably the first time in my life where I was face to face with my emotions, which is curious because I am now a trauma-informed somatic practitioner whom supports others in processing their emotions. And yet as a child, to express sadness, to express frustration, that was never something that was normalized. That was never something that was spoken about. And so this was a moment where there was no hiding or averting or pushing down my emotions. They needed to be felt. And it was a blessing to be in Miami. I'm the eldest of 3 girls and the eldest kin. And my mother was single. And all of the logistics of the funeral and everything moving forward was on me. And I was a child. I was 21 years old. I didn't even know what a corner was at the time. I didn't know a lot of things. So those 3 days being in Miami before I went back to Michigan to be with my sisters and be there for my sisters, just to be together, was really important for me. It allowed me to be with myself, to be with my emotions, to just be in this grief in the exact way that I needed. And that was a very pivotal point in my life. When I came back, I, just like many people today, tried to push through and just tried to push through. Just get through it, push through. You're studying for the MCAT, you're going to medical school. You have a new job now. You're a junior, you're a neuroscience major. You need to step up. These are the things I was hearing myself say to myself in my head. And it wasn't until I was working my service job under a lot of pressure, which I'm generally extremely good at, especially back then. I could deal with a lot of challenging things at once, and it wasn't a problem. Multitasking was great. And then there was one day when I was multitasking as a server, and I felt a physiological response that I've never felt before. And that was anxiety. I felt anxiety. I felt the world constrict in upon me. And I felt my nervous system say something. I know it's been speaking to me my whole life, but I had never listened. And my nervous system was saying, you need to slow down. And it's not even a choice. I will make you slow down. And I called my dad. I went into the bathroom. I'll never forget it. And I said, I can't do this. I can't do this job. I know it's important for me, but I can't do it right now. The MCAT, I need a month or so. I just need a little bit of time to process. And even if it didn't feel safe to slow down, I knew I needed to. And and that's what I did. I started to slow down, call on my friends, be with my family, and it didn't make sense. None of it made sense, but I'm really happy that I listened. And I also dove into my yoga practice. I really, really loved yoga before I lost my mom. Then I was called to yoga after she passed. I utilized it. I resourced it. I stepped into the practice and I allowed it to hold me and to just be with me in support of this grief.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, what a transformational, powerful, emotional journey you got to experience. Have you asked yourself why you? Not everyone gets to or has an experience of this volume, of this kind. What makes it like? I would imagine you recognize your purpose that is rooted in that experience.
Absolutely. And that's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
I enjoy that question a lot because it also points to the victimhood that a lot of us can feel throughout this life in either stress or trauma. Feeling like, why me? How could this have happened to me? And also, on the other side of that perspective, why me? It's a different way of saying it, but why me? Having that transition from a victim mentality to a hero mentality, allowing me to feel empowered in a way by this, is what I hear you asking.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. At first, it started as the former. Why me? Right? My mother was sick for a long time. And I love you, Mom. I don't judge her in anything. I have utmost compassion for the ignorances and the pain that went down and occurred. But with that said, it was a lifelong, not only observation, but interaction with my mother's addiction to narcotics, to toxic men, to dishonesty, to being a victim unto herself, and my mother's childhood traumas, and seeing how that affected her not only as a child, not only as a teenager, but what that unprocessed trauma and lack of support led to, which was chronic depression, chronic pain, chronic anxiety, and PTSD. And she sought medical help many times for each of these diagnoses, and they were diagnoses by the Western medical system. And the only solution that she ever received was extremely serious medications. One of the reasons I wanted to go to medical school is because I feel incredibly passionate about Western medicine in general. And also, when this occurred, I saw how the medical system failed my mother. And also they failed themselves. I do believe they tried their best and also missed the point. Because what my mother was always looking for, that I can see now, that I did not see then, was human connection, was presence, was to be seen, not to be shamed, was to be acknowledged, not to be criticized. And that's a powerful reckoning to see now. So why me? I believe in duality. I don't move from a place of polarity. I move from a place of duality. That place in the center of two opposites, knowing that two opposites can meet in the center and they can exist at the same time. So not that there's light or dark, there's light and dark. And also the greater amount of light that we have, the greater amount of darkness that we have. They coincide, they're mirrors. Why me? This degree of darkness, from Alyssa to my mother, and very challenging childhood trauma, my mother putting us in very dangerous situations continuously for many, many years. The degree of darkness that I've been served in this life has opened the doorway to the degree of light that I can access and that I can touch into. It's also given me a very rare and unique opportunity to truly understand the ramifications of not holistically, fully treating trauma and mental health. It's allowed me to see truly and experience it myself. As, losing her led to my own grief, my own depression, my own anxiety. So why me? I had to feel it. I had to see it. I had to be in my own dark night of the soul, my own hell, in order to believe in a heaven on earth and to move through that darkness in order to get to a heaven on earth. And that was hard. That was very, very hard. But without that experience, I would not have the true compassion and empathy and authentic role in trauma healing for myself and for others.
Yeah, maybe you could speak about the switch, the transition. Was it a rapid shift for you? Was it a very slow, gradual shift from traumatic you to healed you that now is helping other people to heal?
Slow. It's
steady. Yeah,
it's been such a journey.
Mm-hmm.
The dreams that I had as a child couldn't have even touched the life I'm living today. And I'm by no means in a place of, absolute abundance financially or professionally or anything like that yet. And also the joy that I can tap into today and the alignment I feel with where I'm at is far beyond anything I could have ever imagined. So this happened junior year of 2014. And I was raised by my father, very traditional Indian family. My grandparents are from India, from Gujarat. They practice Jainism and they follow Ganesha. These are all things that were happening in the background of my life. But due to the complexity of the trauma that we were facing, very dangerous situations, life-threatening situations consistently as children, that led to me being the eldest child to become very controlling, to become very ambitious, and to become very, very academic because that's what I knew. So even after losing her, I took a little break from the MCAT, but then I was like, I will do this. I will make this happen. In a survival mode, I was surviving. And it wasn't until I was right about to take the MCAT that I listened to a gut impulse. The first time in my life I've ever listened to a gut impulse was in that moment. And it told me, you don't want to go to medical school. I started crying immediately. Maybe I laughed first and then cried because at the age of 5, I drew a timeline. And at that timeline had me at University of Michigan Medical School. Mm-hmm. And here I am as a senior, just spent 3.5 years doing everything I can, the diligence, the arduousness that it takes to be in neuroscience at the University of Michigan. And now my gut is telling me, this isn't what you want. And I listened. I just knew that I needed to listen. So that was my first midlife crisis. I didn't know what to do at the time with just a neuroscience degree from the University of Michigan. Research, sure. But that didn't excite me. And I felt halted. I felt so confused. So I drew an infographic or whatever that is called with just a little image in the middle, this like stick figure me with all the different possibilities on the outside. What could I do with this degree? Where could I go next? Again, moving forward mentality, very masculine mentality in the way that pausing wasn't an option for me. Not continuing my education was not an option for me. Raised by a very conservative Indian family, furthering my education was a responsibility and a privilege that I was pushed into. So not going to school wasn't an option for me in my mind. But I did allow myself to take some time. I knew I needed a year. So I did research in the trauma burn ICU and in the surgical ICU for 6 months. And then I backpacked Southeast Asia for 2.5 months with one of my best friends at the time, Sophie. Over these 2.5 months, back in 2016, we chose not to get a cell phone card. And so when we went there, we didn't have cell phone usage outside of hostel Wi-Fi, which most people know is pretty shoddy. Like it doesn't come through. So we were unplugged the whole thing on the journey without a phone, going by a map, getting lost up, to a mountain and having to find our way. As two American women who have risk-averse family members, fear-based family members, we had fear really planted in us. Don't trust anybody. And we learned how to trust ourselves in that. We learned how to evolve through that. And that year was pivotal for me because it allowed me to make the next choice in my life, which was become a master of public health in nutritional sciences and dietetics. My mother taught me how to cook. I love to cook for others, especially. And I realized that the reason why my gut spoke to me so clearly, so strongly, is because preventative medicine is what aligned with me most. Helping people before they get very sick. Helping people before they get sick. And so I set my eyes on the Master of Public Health program at University of Michigan, and I got in. And it went from being a small minnow in a giant ocean to being one of 50 people, 50. It was an extremely different experience. I had a close connection with my cohort. I had a close connection with my teachers. It was an incredible opportunity going through this program. With that said, after the first year, I started to go to therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, because that's what I felt like was the natural step forward, and that's also what I heard would be helpful. And though it was a door that was open and I stepped through it, it actually led to chronic and severe depression. It led to chronic and severe anxiety. And it led to the first time in my life where I couldn't show up at school. I would show up at school, but I wouldn't be there. I was very sick. I suffered from GI distress, sleep distress, and eventually was convinced to give medications a try. I had never been on medications in my life. I had never had any problems as a child. I was very lucky to just be pretty even keel. So seeing my mom and her connection with medications, at first it was a hard no. It was a lot of apprehension. And a part of me wishes that I would have listened to that. But I didn't have that connection yet with myself. I didn't have that trust yet with myself. And there was a lot happening at the time. So I said, okay. And I trusted others. And I trusted the process, as many people know, and it is very effective for some people. It takes time and it takes trial and error. This trial and error process can be extremely challenging and bring up a lot of other symptoms. And that's what it did for me. I was also given a cocktail of different medications for sleep, for anxiety, for attention deficit disorder, which I don't have. I do not have ADD, but I was given medication for it. And again, why me? I had to go through that process. It was a very dark process. I had to go through it to feel my smile not meet my eyes. Although I was getting better in some ways, I told my dad one day, I don't think this is working. My smile can't reach my eyes. I don't feel like myself. My appetite isn't natural. It's not normal. Different things like this. I could just sense. And a lot of people had apprehension because they wanted me to get better, and that was their only understanding towards it. but my ex-partner at the time, Christian, and I were going to a trip to China. And I'd never been to someplace outside of Southeast Asia. I was very excited. And I knew I wanted myself back. It was about 1.5 years. This is 2018 at this point. And I had spoken to a couple professionals, but I trusted myself and I trusted my gut since that first time that I listened to it and didn't go to medical school. And it said, you don't need this. You can heal differently, not on your own, but you can heal differently. So I weaned off my own medication and I went to China and I did it. And I was strongly determined to move forward in a different way and to get myself back. And yeah, and that's what I did. And that led me to finishing my master's of public health, to graduating, and again, not going on the conventional path. I did the dietetic route, which is a special route, generally leads you to becoming a dietitian in a clinical setting. My gut said, no, that you don't want to be in a hospital. That's why you didn't go to medical school. There's something else for you. And I went from, this whole time I'm going from a very conservative side, Western medical side, tangible side. What can I measure? If I can measure it, I believe it. If I can't measure it, I don't believe it. That's where I was at. People who know me today are probably surprised by that, but that's where I was at. Very much, if I can't see it, I don't believe it. God, energy, all of those things, those weren't in my vocabulary. But the universe was slowly bringing me this way, to my master's, and then to functional medicine, nutrition. I was exposed to muscle testing. Are you familiar with muscle testing? That was very new for me, Kirill. I had never seen anything like that. Mm-hmm. So yoga teaches us to observe, not to judge. At first I judged when I was in there. My brain just did. But I observed it judging. And I said, just watch, just observe, see what's happening. And after 6 months of a lot of apprehension and just skepticism in what is happening here, what's actually happening here, I understood nervous system regulation. I saw people healing. I understood what was happening over time. Each practitioner has a different nuanced approach. But I started to learn, I started to believe it. And I started to believe it because I understood it. And that was the first time in my life that I was believing in something I couldn't quantify. And I started to sense it. I would know what the practitioner was about to say before they said it. And that was what opened up nervous system regulation for me. This was mostly through supplements. And though I believe that has a time and place, I eventually walked away because I saw a lot of people spending enormous amounts of money on supplements. And again, my gut said, you believe in the inner physician. You believe in the inner healer. There's a time and place for supplements. There's a time and place for external resources always. And also, I believe in the body's healing potential and wisdom. So that was during COVID. I had the opportunity and the support of my ex-partner at the time to start my own business. And at the time, yoga is what I eat, slept, and breathed. That's what I knew. So it's like, okay, open up a private practice in yoga. It's going to be different because you're no longer teaching studio classes or communities. You're going to be working one-on-one. Well, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Clients came to me. I created an oasis in our backyard because it was COVID and we were in Michigan and people coming inside was not an option. That just maybe for 1 in 100, but most people didn't trust that at the time. So I flexed. I flowed. I was like, okay, we'll go outside. And it was beautiful. But as I was teaching one-on-one yoga, I was missing something. There was a missing piece. And that was because I started to watch on a bio-individualized level how stress manifests in our body. I was able to learn and see and observe various patterns of stress inside of people's tissues. And I wanted to become a breathwork practitioner. I wanted to learn how to work with that. And I also wanted to dive into a trauma-informed method because of my experience, and also because I saw a lot of this starting to become hot and trendy, but a lot of people not necessarily fully understanding it yet.
What is a trauma-informed therapy, you said?
Yeah, trauma-informed approach. At the time, I just knew that I wanted to have a trauma-informed approach, but I didn't know what that would look like. So first I started by, it was COVID, so I did an online certification. I became an XPT, certified breathwork coach back in 2019. Wow, 2019. And that was incredible. That was mostly for athletes, performance athletes. I was working with the University of Michigan rugby team, University of Michigan golfer, Michaela Schultz, a lot of athletes from the University of Michigan. So that was kind of my niche at the time. But I'm always listening to podcasts, always trying to pick up some information or just be open. And I was listening to a podcast and by a doctor of Chinese medicine speaking about a 5 elemental approach to trauma healing. And I started to cry. The words she was saying in a beautiful way, no sadness, just miracle. The words she was saying was exactly what I wanted to hear, but I didn't know it. And it was like pulling out an essence inside of me that had been there, but I had never had the words for it. So I looked her up on Google. I found her number and I called her and she answered. And I asked if I could be in her upcoming certification. I know it's already started. I'm not a doctor of Chinese medicine. I'm not a licensed acupuncturist, but I'm a student and I want to learn. And I don't know why, but I want to learn from her. And she accepted me. She said, yes, let's do it. And I was the youngest, the least experienced. And it was one of the best decisions of my life because it taught me somatic healing. It taught me somatic touch theory. It taught me the 5 elements of Chinese medicine from an East meets West perspective, blending the Eastern Chinese medicine 5 elemental theory with the Western neuroscience theory, specifically from a man named Stephen Porges, who focuses on the polyvagal theory and a trauma-informed approach to the nervous system. So really what that looks like simply is a lot of people think there's only 2 branches to the nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic, right? We see those depicted often, right? But there's actually 3 branches. There's not just 2. You have the sympathetic, and then you have 2 branches of the parasympathetic. And it's really important to become versed with those 2 branches because you start to learn that when it comes to our stress response system, it's not just a on, it's not just a fight or flight or an off, rest and digest. It actually comes down to safety. Whether we're able to pump the brakes and discern if this is safe versus threat, or if we have to turn on a hard stop, that depends on your dorsal vagus, your dorsal vagal nerve and your ventral vagal nerve. So your vagus nervous system. That's what it depends on. And without getting into the physiology, it just comes down to safety. It comes down to, why are we not safe? What causes disconnection really? And how is it that we can bring regulation back to a client's tissues through the way we speak? When I say we, I mean practitioners of somatic healing, specifically this. How can we bring regulation, harmony, and health back to somebody's tissues through the way we speak, through the way we touch, and through the way that we practice? And yeah, that led me to more so where I am today.
How would you in general define what is somatic healing?
So the soma is your body. And out of 100% of your neurons, 20% of your neurons travel top down from your brain to your gut. 20% brain to gut. But then you have 80% that move from your gut to your brain. The majority of people are operating day to day mainly utilizing the 20% of their neurons, which go from their brain to their gut, usually unconsciously bypassing the gut and the 80% that travels bottom up, gut to brain. So somatic healing is working with a bottom up neurological model that focuses on the gut brain connection rather than the brain gut connection.
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like, working with the soma, is working with this somatosensory part of you. That has to do with, yes, the 5 senses, but mostly what I work with are your 6th and even your 7th sense, which if you type this in like your text or Google, they'll probably try to autocorrect you because the word isn't there. But the 6th sense is proprioception. Are you familiar?
No.
Proprioception is our neurological capacity to know where we are in space, to know where the body is in space, to sense where the body is in space. So imagine like your capacity to close your eyes right now, and with an imaginary crayon, you could very accurately draw a line around your body image. Okay. A lot of people, the majority of humanity has at least a micro dissociative tendency, which means that many of us with technology and with capitalism and with stress, chronic stress and social media, we're consistently kicked out of our body. Like we're not actually in our body. We're slightly dissociated, like a micro dissociation. No matter how much you practice mindfulness and things like this, all of us are prone to it. It can happen. So the work is really bringing yourself back into the body, right? So proprioceptive awareness. I work with that through so many different things, but mainly through blindfolded work. So I take away the eyes, take away the occipital input, and allow that energy to be shunted towards less of what you can see, more of what you can feel. Mm-hmm. Also, like bigger questions of who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here? Like those esoteric questions, really, right? So proprioception, use proprioception for somatosensory capacity, and then interoception, interoception, which is the capacity to sense physiological signals on the inside. For example, your satiety, your heart rate, your circulation, temperature in your head and your toes. It's the capacity to feel that. Important to know that many people aren't aware of if they're full or if they're empty, if they've had enough to eat or if they're still hungry. They've had enough of this relationship. They need to step away. It affects all 5 bodies of us: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about the somatosensory, working so with the body.
Just the additional sense, it's the only related to the senses of the awareness of your body, that you have the organs, the how each part of your body feels, and that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also beginning to, as human beings, to be a human, we must accept that we have emotions. And accepting that looks like understanding that, maybe, if you choose to. And a lot of people are speaking about how important it is to process your emotions. It's a hot topic right now. But what I find is that a lot of people become overcome by this process. We start to become obsessed with our emotions and taken over by them. We call it emotional processing, but in a way it's spiritual bypassing. It's becoming taken over by an energy. Emotions are supposed to come in and through you. If they didn't have that opportunity, then they need to be touched into again so that you can let it go. And I started to work with children and adults, but children with this too, more emotional intelligence work through proprioception and interoception, starting to tap into and, that emoji movie, Inside Out, personify our emotions, get to know them, For example, a child puts their hand here. Miss Alexandra, I feel tightness, and I feel tightness here. And then they do this, and they're making a motion with their hands. I feel tightness, I feel heat, and I feel red. The child at the moment doesn't know that they are feeling anger. They don't know that word to the emotion. They don't need to know that word. They just need to have the awareness to what it is they're feeling in order to be with that and then let it go. But the most important piece of that is that now, as they're a child evolving through life, when they feel tightness in their chest and they feel this and they feel heat and they feel red, no longer do they feel a victim unto themselves or confused. What's happening to me? Or like they need to shove it down.
Yep.
They recognize, hey, Mom, I don't feel so great. I have a lot of anger here. And now they can do something about it. And so that's where it really comes into play too, allowing us to personify our emotions, not to keep them in the house, but to eventually to allow them to be a guest, then ask them to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts at the root. It starts in childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some practices that you find effective in bringing awareness and teaching kids from early age to being able to pinpoint and describe and identify emotions?
Yeah. Well, the breath. Children are very in touch with the breath. They just forget about it. But when you cue them to breathe, then it's a great resource. So the breath, somatic touch. So first, the breath and awareness. First, becoming aware to where tension or discomfort is in the body.
And maybe give me a little bit more actionable. Let's say a parent is trying to incorporate maybe a practice with their child.
Okay, got
How
you.
would they go? So breath. I mean, we all breathe. It might not be as actionable. They might not know what to do with it.
Usually, what we would do is a lot of writing. An actionable step is journaling, and this is inner child healing work. But we would notice what emotion's coming up, and then the parent would sit down with said child and encourage them to write to the emotion. And that is one of the most practical tools that I use often, journaling and inner child healing. That question is also, it's interesting because usually this also teaches the parent that what the child needs most is presence from the parent. I think usually we're trying to fix something. We're always looking for that actionable item. And often what I learn with these kids is they're not really looking to be fixed. They're not looking for action. They're looking just to be with somebody. That presence.
Yeah, but maybe speak a little bit more about the breath. Maybe give some examples of the breath practice that somebody can implement maybe or start.
Absolutely. For either a kid or an adult, a lot of people hear about box breathing. That is a fantastic place to start, especially if you add the visual cue of drawing a box. It's very helpful for a child. But for me, I work with a lot of vocalization. And so for breathwork, I would cue a healing sound, a sound that resonates with the organ. I would cue a sound, and I can give an example, but a sound that specifically slows down the exhalation in order to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's what you're asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a breath technique that slows the exhalation to stimulate a calming effect, a safe and connecting effect. And an example of that would be the sound SSS, making that sound continuously and as long as you can. So you want to do it with me?
Sure. Yeah.
Take a deep breath in the nose. So you close your eyes and just do it as long as you can. Is there anything you notice immediately with that?
Present.
Present. Yeah. So it brings us into the present moment. It also creates space between the stimulus and the response.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the best tools that I use is an inhale paired with an extended exhale via a sound of, based in Chinese medicine.
Mm-hmm. What are some other useful, effective tools that in your toolbox that you walk around with?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the breath technique that I just supplied is very effective. And also in the world of breathwork, nervous system regulation, and somatic healing, there is a large emphasis on how much we need to relax. So much so there might be an over emphasis of how much we need to relax. So there's a lot of parasympathetic based techniques out there, and we do need those. And also, for people who are stuck in depression or stuck in a parasympathetic freeze state or a fawn state, slowing them down more is not the effective route. Actually, they need activation in a calm way, but they need activation. They need sympathetic nervous system activation to pull them out of that rut and get them back to baseline. Does that make sense? So one of the tools that I use for that is spoken by Andrew Huberman a lot. Andrew Huberman loves this breathwork technique, and this is one of the only evidence-based research techniques there is, and it's the physiological sigh. Double inhale, single exhale. Sometimes it can be a little longer. Now, as you do that, the first thing I see is your shoulders lift. And that's very normal because your accessory muscles, your auxiliary muscles are trying to breathe for you. That's why I usually start people laying down to give the throne back to the diaphragm, which means that you're breathing with your belly. So try to put your hand on your belly and take 2 inhales and move your belly. Feel the difference? Yeah. So that's one of the best techniques that we can use to be both calm, focused, and energized at the same time. This is something you can use during mountain biking, running, before an exam when you're driving in the car and you'd like to get more oxygen to your brain and your tissues throughout your body. So the physiological sigh is one of the most effective tools. And the basis of breathing in general is to give the throne back to the diaphragm, because the diaphragm has generally lost its power to be the main muscle to support your breathing. Also with that is buppal breathing, buppal, which is 3 inhales followed by an exhale. The first inhale is like a cup of water, and the next 2 are like 2 tablespoons. So the first one's a lot bigger, next 2 smaller. This breath technique creates an increased volume of air inside of your lungs, so much so that the exhale, it just falls out. It's effortless. And so that's another tool that I like to use as well.
Mm-hmm. How do you decide what tool works for who? Let's say a client comes to you and after a certain assessment, you already have an idea what to work on and how to approach it.
Absolutely. So for a primary and the introduction to breathwork session, I run most clients through a similar program. I'm in the works of trademarking an approach that I've been building over the past 5 years, which is a 5-step process that emulates the stress protective response cycle. It actually puts you through what you would go through when you're faced with trauma in order to fully complete that cycle in your own tissues. For some people, that means maybe reliving a trauma. But the way that I do it is not like holotropic breathing, and it's not very vigorous or forceful. It's a bit more seemingly calming so that people can be in a safe and secure space. So that looks like those 5 steps and going through both the physiological sigh and buppal breathing, going through each of those steps. And without getting into, the technicalities of it, that's using different sounds on the exhale to resonate with individual organs in your body. So I want to step back and explain that a little bit better. Will you ask me the question one more time?
Yeah. How do you decide what tool to use in what situation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beginning with the introduction to breathwork, there's a standardized program that I put people through in order to be able to observe which one of the 5 elements they are stuck in. What I mean by that is touching back on the East meets West perspective for trauma healing. There's a man named Stephen Porges, neuroscientist. He discovered that all 2- and 4-legged mammals go through the exact same 5-step process. So we go through the same process that a bear goes through. And that's really interesting because when we study the evolution of a bear and we study the stress protective response cycle of a bear, and we studied in humans, we're able to see that now we have a diagnostic model. And this is only Western based, right? So that's Stephen Porges's. He discovered a 5-step cycle.
Could you repeat that? What's that 5-step?
Yes, I can. I'll do it. I'll do it in terms of both the East meets West, if that's okay. Yeah. So we have Stephen Porges's Western neuroscience perspective, and then you have a doctor of Chinese medicine's approach, in which you have the 5 elements of Chinese medicine. And when you lay the 5 elements of Chinese medicine on top of the 5 SPR, the 5 stress protective response cycle, now we have a diagnostic model for healing trauma. That's really interesting because every person in their lifetime, generally, their physiological pattern of holding on to stress is the same. They will generally have the same step blocked throughout their lives because it hasn't been successfully completed yet. Something's been blocked. What I mean by that is when trauma happens, it's like a lightning bolt hitting a tree. The entire tree is in survival mode, and it just needs to shut down and take care of what's most important in that moment, which means that something was blocked in that moment. It was halted because it wasn't what was important at the time. What was important was that you were alive. So you get through that, but there's been something missing. So we can start with the first step, which is the metal element in Chinese medicine. But neurologically speaking, it's our capacity, our nervous system's capacity to notice that there's something new in the environment. We can give a very classic practical example. Imagining that we leave a restaurant and we exit into a back alley. We took a wrong door. Now we're in a place that we've never been before. It's dark. It's silent. This is where we are. Cool. So the first step is the metal element, and it resonates with the neurological capacity to observe something new in the environment. A twig snaps. You need the neurological capacity to notice that there's something new. If you're on your phone, you're probably going to be distracted and you're not going to notice. So that full present awareness, twig snapped. Oh, I'm not alone here. That's step 1. Step 2 is moving from the metal element, which resonates with the season of fall, to the water element, which resonates with the season of winter. And the water element is directly related to the capacity of your nervous system to correctly discern, is this safety or is this danger? To be a human being on the planet Earth, we need to accurately understand if we are safe or if we're in danger. Very modern example based around technology. Many teenage kids these days, adults even, if we don't receive the amount of likes, the average amount of likes on a post that we're used to. And many kids and adults these days, they don't know that that's safe. They think that that's dangerous, which means that now they're using their neurological resources to fight off a danger when actually that's a commensurable threat. That's not danger at all. That's just something that happens as a product of life, you know? So we're in a back alley. We hear a twig snap. Now, the second element is going to ask you, is this safe? Is this threatening? And you know that based on your nervous system's capacity, your nervous system's regulation. It's dangerous, we discover. It's dangerous. That's what our gut says. Third element is the wood element resonates with the season of spring. And that's the neurological capacity to get the heck out of there. That's the sympathetic nervous system capacity. Third step, SNS, fight or flight. When your water element speaks to your wood element, because this is how they work circularly, it says this is dangerous, run. So the blood is no longer around your intra-abdominal organs and your gut. You don't need to digest anything right then. You need to have your blood shunted to your extremities, that which is needed to run, your arms and your legs. So you run, you escape, you get out of there. However long it takes, you get out of there. And then that brings you to step 4, which is the season of summer, the element of fire, and the neurological capacity to have equanimity in the brain and the body, equanimity in the kingdom. Equanimity means balance. Equanimity physiologically means that an increased heart rate is now coming to homeostasis. It's balancing. It's coming to baseline. That means that when you're in fight or flight and your pupils constricted, so you could see what's in front of you and only pick up the most important data, now they're able to dilate and come back to explorative curiosity and take in their surroundings and take in nature and take in beauty. And I'll say that many people do not complete that part of the cycle. They've been in a situation that's been dangerous. They've fled, they got out successfully, but they never fully completed the 4th step, which brings equanimity and balance back into the body, which keeps them running and being triggered this way throughout their life, running away from something that's no longer there, utilizing neurological resources to keep them safe when they are. So that's the 4th step. And the 5th step, because there's 5 seasons in Chinese medicine, is late summer. That's the element of earth. And earth in Chinese medicine there's 4 elements on the outside and earth is on the inside. It's integral to each of the elements, but it is the last of this 5-step protective response cycle. And this step is your neurological capacity to digest the grit, to digest what is hard to chew. Like, think of like a fibrous piece of meat, like you have to bite into it, chew it, break it down. When you break it down, what's happening nutritionally is you are assimilating nutrients. You are receiving the nutrients of the food source you're eating, and then you poop out the rest. Those are 2 very important steps to be able to assimilate the nutrients and let the rest go. And this is another place where many people get stuck, because no matter how mindful, no matter how regulated you are, no matter how many times you've gone through a different circumstance but same lesson, there's always something else that you can learn. There's always something else that you can break down or chew, something you can receive, something you can let go. Many of us, all of us, at some point in our life, whether you call it trauma, whether you call it stress, it is the same spectrum. Stress is a lesser trauma. Stress is a micro trauma. Trauma's, macro, right? We all have been through challenging things in our life that have stopped us in our tracks. We all need the capacity to be able to accept what is challenging, accept what is uncomfortable, to see it with clear consciousness and awareness, and to break it down, to receive the nutrients of the lesson, and then move on. Many of us go through the same patterns over and over and over, and we see it. I'm changing this, I'm changing this, I'm changing this. Why is this happening? And it's because we're not learning. We're not receiving the nutrients of the lesson. We're not truly learning and breaking it down and then letting the rest go. And that's the 5 steps. And we go through that through the breathwork program that I've created. And what's really beautiful is the client doesn't need to know any of this. I empower them with the knowledge, but not the first time we meet. I don't want them to intellectualize it. They don't need to know. And they go through it. And 99 out of 100 times, there is a large emotional catharsis. Large emotional catharsis. Men, women, young, old, people who go through this program release in a very specific way, or a very bio-individualized way, but they release and they let go. So to circle back to your question, how do I make that decision? After that first introduction to breathwork session, I observe their physiology. I observe their responses. I observe them through how I've been trained. And also, I've taught over 2,000 individuals now, and most of them one-on-one. And it's through that experience and observing, never judging, but pure explorative curiosity in this practice that then allows me to move forward and work with the specific element they're blocked in with specific breathwork, Tai Chi, Qigong, and sometimes yoga too. And then I create a very specialized program for them. We'll begin the practice with a little bit of movement, generally Tai Chi or Qigong. And we're standing, we're circulating the energy. Longevity and circulation go hand in hand. In order to live long, healthy lives, we must be able to circulate blood throughout our body from brain to toe, head to toe. We need to be able to circulate oxygen throughout our blood from head to toe. We need to be able to circulate lymph from head to toe. We need to circulate. So we circulate the energy, we balance the energy. And then we lay down on our backs, and then we do breath work. I incorporate a little bit of journaling, introspective practices, and then I ask them to journal after their session and send it to me. It's called Reflection for Integration. They send me their reflections, I integrate it, and then I create the next session. And that's how it goes. It's absolutely beautiful as it's pure observation. And they are leading me, they're guiding me. Though I have experience, I never have an assumption or an expectation. I allow them to have their process in the way that it's showing up.
What would be, maybe tell me a story of the most extreme cases that somebody came in a very unbalanced, stressed state, and then after working with you, something that stood out like almost like an edge case in your practice.
That's a wonderful question. I'm going to think about it. Now, the first one that comes to mind, it's not the most extreme case. But it was one of the first times that I saw the physical and the energy come hand in hand. One of my students at the time just got out of a relationship that she knew wasn't serving her, but she didn't have the courage at the time to step out of it. And actually, let me back up first. We had a breathwork session, and she was in this relationship in which it just wasn't working out for either of them. She was very content. She was not lit up from the inside out. And that was okay for her then. She went on a retreat to Budokan in Montana. And when she went on that retreat, still in this relationship, after the heart-opening breathwork session we had, she met a man she fell in love with at first sight. She broke up with her boyfriend. She came home. She said, I fell in love. I'm moving to Utah. I said, what? She goes, you opened my heart. Like something changed. And all of this happened very quickly. And I just observed what's happening here. She now has 2 children with this man. They've created a dojo and gymnasium. And she's deeply, deeply in love, in coherent, harmonic, pure, true love. And she made the choices all for herself. And we ended breathwork very quickly after that. It just tied the ribbon and it was done. But it was through a heart-opening breathwork practice that she could move from that place of fear into a place of recognizing and sensing and being with true love. That was incredible. That was incredible.
To what extent are you utilizing Western medicine? Most of the things that are you would consider Eastern medicine, right?
Definitely.
What are some Western medicine practices that you're incorporating in your work?
Yeah, definitely. Really, it's the background knowledge of neuroscience. It's a lot of teaching others more about the nervous system from a very clear, clean Western side of things. And the physiological sigh. The physiological sigh, though I bring the healing sounds into it. So really it's just understanding the nervous system and educating others on the nervous system and the physiology of it, as well as the biomechanics of breathing, actually. In that sense, absolutely. I have a very diverse population of clients that come to me. And so I speak their language. If it's a mechanic, I make a metaphor to a car. If it's somebody a little more spiritual, maybe I'll make a metaphor to a violin or a horse, whatever they connect with. But when it comes to respiration, when it comes to breath work, at the end of the day, it's about your respiratory system. No, it's about the anatomy and physiology of your respiratory system. And so breaking down different things, like there's 10 pounds of muscle that are dedicated to breathing, 10 pounds of breathing muscles, and they're underutilized. And then I explain that, and I help individuals to visualize what's actually happening on the inside physiologically when they are breathing. You don't need a background in neuroscience or medicine to understand that, but it's really important to know. So that's the main way that I utilize it. Education around the biodynamics of and the biomechanics of respiration.
Yeah. There's so as you know, I'm techno optimist and technologist and futurist, and I always look for ways how to utilize technology in probably solving very similar problems that what you're and somebody else might be solving is how do we evolve, how do we expand our consciousness, how do we heal, and all of those things. And what you're bringing up, you're helping them visualize something. I think technology and something like virtual reality or some kind of projection, instead of you just relying on your visualization abilities, which most people don't, unless you're like a creative person who that's their job, they're constantly practicing. I'm one of them, by the way. Like I certainly visualize a lot of things, but I know that that's not an easy thing to do for someone, especially, let's say, when you tell them close their eyes and visualize your energy centers and how the energy flows. For them, it's a little bit challenging to visualize.
Absolutely.
And I thought of this experience. Imagine you are in, let's say, in some kind of virtual. I mean, you could still be in your world, but there's an overlay of visualization of you. Let's say you are in front of the mirror and you are seeing like an MRI scan in a way of your organs, of your internal systems, and it accurately scans and represents. It's very synced with your breathing, and it shows you what actually is happening. I think that could be a powerful tool to bring more awareness into your center, into yourself.
Absolutely, Kirill. I couldn't agree more, and I'm really happy you said that, because when you ask me what am I currently utilizing in the field of Western medicine, it's not much yet, because thus far on this process, I've been moving from the Western more towards the Eastern, and then finding a balance. Now I'm finding a balance in between. I've been very Eastern centric over the past 3 to 4 years. And also one of the reasons why I appreciate you so much is a very large contrast to me with your connection to technology, with your understanding to technology, with your inspiration around technology. And you are actually, I believe, the person who, the impetus to me recognizing my resistance to technology. Everything from communications to, if I don't have to be by my phone, I do not want to be by my phone. And also that's a resource when you have a mindset like that, that blocks you and resists you to the capacities, the wonderful capacities of it. So it's been through meeting you that I've recognized my resistance to technology. And as a human being on planet Earth in the here and now as we evolve, I would be missing out if I didn't learn and accept a relationship, an evolving relationship with technology. And that's led me to, one, virtual reality. Yes, I am calling in and aligning an opportunity with virtual reality, an opportunity to collaborate with a virtual reality technology for, yes, that would be a massive support tool. It is extremely challenging for many people to get in touch with visualization. And I have different techniques for those people too. And also, though, it's not as effective, I don't believe, as where virtual reality could take us. That is certainly a place that we can capitalize on. Mm-hmm. As well as my background's in research. My background is in neuroscience. My passion, actually, as spiritual as I am today, it's in science. And so evidence-based research, that is what I would like to see. And that also, I'm aligning in and calling in an opportunity with Andrew Huberman or somebody like that, because he really does have an appreciation for the evidence-based research aspect of respiration. But if you go on PubMed and you look at how many articles are centered around respiration or breathwork, less than 100, that's nothing. We have a lot of room to grow to back up these practices that are over 5,000 years old, whether it's Tai Chi or yoga. Ancient schools of wisdom have known this for a long time. But in order to have the efficacy behind these techniques, we need the research behind it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would like to see more of. That's what I'd like to have a hand in more. And also places like Supermind. I'm the primary neuroscience coach at Supermind. And I'm so grateful for Chad and G. Cole for bringing me onto the team as they've developed this brain mapping science called Supermind, where we can quantify the subconscious, unconscious, and conscious layers of our mind in order to better understand what's actually happening. That excites me. And this week, I'll be working with Chad doing a pre and post breathwork experiment to see how his brain looks before and after. Just like dipping the toe in the water. But that's what I'm interested in, Kirill. That's what I'm passionate about. And that's where I'm moving now back into the center. But it's taken a little bit of time to acknowledge this resistance to technology and now meet myself in the desire to harness it and connect with it more.
Yeah, I mean, rightfully so. To move away from technology, I see a lot of people are burned by technology. It's like it's almost like there's almost like a global trauma around technology because it brought a lot of, distraction, pulling you from you and you not being present, you disconnecting from others, you feeling lonely. All of those things have definitely been true, but I don't think that those things are innate to technology. Technology has just exposed those things about our ways of being in the new environment and a new way of self-organizing. We've never had a way of global organization, like where now you can see content from every part of the world. You can compare yourself with any person in the world. We've never had that before social media. Yes, we are, it feels like we are connected more than ever. At the same time, we are disconnected. We feel lonely. That's also us. Basically, it's a new modality that we are like babies who are learning how to walk. And we're just learning what works and what doesn't work. And we just need to recognize what does work, and the things that are not working, we need to address them, and we need to double down on things that do work. And in general, technology, I think, it's an extraordinary tool that actually made us human. Humans became humans because we created tools. We created our first somewhat primitive tools like a stick or an arrow and things like that. And that's what differentiated us, gave us the competitive advantage to evolve and grow further and build communities and cities and all of those things. And I think that's what's going to continue to propel us forward in the development of our evolution, like a consciousness evolution. That,
I really appreciate that perspective. I really appreciate that perspective. It brings to mind, you said it's like a global epidemic, basically, with technology. A couple things come to mind. And one is, I noticed recently how many people take a long time to respond. I am one of them. I am. I am one of them. And with some people and some others, not. It takes a lot of consciousness and desire to, and also it's not even that. It's not being a victim to technology, but to step back for a moment. Yes, this global overwhelm around technology, to the point that people are now having text paralysis, and taking a very long time to respond, because of overwhelm, certainly. And then second thing that came to mind was the victim mentality again, though. It's very easy when we start to have these symptoms of loneliness, like you mentioned, and etc., to point the finger onto the technology.
That's right.
And to say it's the technology's fault. I really appreciate that light bulb, because I know that for myself and for others. The most empowering thing to do is simply awareness, like you said, what to do and what not to do. It is not the phone that's creating these issues. It's you using the phone in the way that you use it that creates these issues.
There's one important point, though. It's not only the way you use the phone. There are systems and incentive structures set up in such a way, almost like against you.
Well, absolutely.
Right.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. So
manipulative.
Right.
Targeting. Yeah. We will pull you in. Absolutely. Of course.
Yeah. Being aware of them. And if there is an option to choose an alternative, and it's a job of technologists to create alternatives and bring out to people, and
absolutely.
Then people being aware that, okay, this is kind of what we went through a phase and still are very much in that process of getting more awareness around food and what's healthy, what's not healthy. So there are a whole lot of options now around healthy food. Before, we didn't have those options. It's a very similar idea, I think, in social media, in technological tools, and how they're using our data and things like that. So maybe there are no alternatives yet, but it starts with awareness. People say, if there would be an alternative, I would choose something else, and somebody will create that alternative for that reason.
Yeah, I hear awareness, access, and accountability are really important in that process. And it invites me to think about, it's just like driving down Alton Road. If you had 100 McDonald's, it would be a very different experience. And so, yes, drawing awareness to, this is what is happening and this is how it is affecting me, in regards to technology, in order to be empowered rather than a victim to it. because it does come down to sovereignty. It does come down to choice. And our ability to choose is developed by what we are aware of, what we are paying attention to, what we are investing and concentrating our attention to, in a way similar to trauma healing. Many of us feel victim unto ourselves because we don't understand the manifestations of stress and where they're coming from. Maybe we don't even remember. Actually, we've repressed it because that part of our brain was trying to keep us safe and still is. It's wasting our energy. So again, awareness to what happened, what happened. That's very simple. Who was I then? Who am I now? And how do I move forward with this information? How do I make a wiser, more sustainable choice in the spirit of evolution to grow, to not be stuck in that fifth element, the earth element, to not continue to be stuck in the same problem over and over and over, but to evolve from it and be able to make more responsible decisions for ourselves. Definitely.
What would you say is your mission? What's your mission? Why are you here? What are you working towards?
I truly believe that each and every one of us has a healer on the inside. We have the capacity to heal ourselves. At times, there's going to be a season to ask for help and to outsource with external resources. That is absolutely necessary in some seasons and some times. And also, I firmly believe in and rooted in the idea that our human body, just like the oceans, just like the forests, are designed for homeostasis, balance, and health. Not just contentment, not just okay, but joy and beauty and pain and the textures of what it means to fully embrace this human experience, what it is to fully be human. So my mission is to empower others with the knowledge and experience, connecting with their inner healer in order to fully enjoy the experience of being human.
Beautiful, yeah.
That's my mission.
Beautiful, yeah, thank you. And those who are listening or watching, how can they support you if they feel called to, support your mission? What can they do?
Absolutely. First and foremost, you can all follow me on Instagram at Sheth Studios, SHETH Studios on Instagram.
As well, of course, yeah.
And that's a creative outlet, and also I share different opportunities. But mainly, if you are interested even 1% in this podcast, in learning more, reach out to me. Schedule a free consultation. Experience what this would be like. If you have friends, family members, people who are no longer friends, but you knew them, and you know that they need help, and you think that this could be a piece of support for them, send them my way. If I'm not the one for them, I know people that would be. If it's not you, send somebody, refer them, allow them to get the support that is a little unique and maybe exactly what they need. In community opportunities, I now live in Miami. I lived in Michigan for 30 years. I moved here a year and a half ago. And I've been really lucky to be welcomed and received by the city. So I teach at Hanu in South Beach. I teach at the Standard. I'm now starting a few relationships with Sacred Space and Faina. So if you're interested in community events, we have those. Those are available. One specifically is on July 9th at Sacred Space, Tuesday, 7 p.m. If you're listening to this and you're interested, July 9th, Tuesday, 7 p.m., Sacred Space. Come on out. Be there.
Beautiful. And last question, could you paint for me the picture of a desirable best case scenario future that you would want to live in, of any aspect of that future. It doesn't have to be, whatever aspects of the future that calls you and that are important to you.
I'm surprised that brings up some emotions. Definitely because of the state of the world currently. I want to, speak to and at least touch on the fact of the global affairs going on in the world right now. And I have been witness to the various perspectives on if we do or do not have hope for humanity. And I've heard equal sides of both. A lot of people struggle to have hope for humanity right now. A lot of people struggle to have hope for the planet. And I am not blind when I say I have hope for our planet and I have hope for humanity. And we need to make changes in order to get to this desirable future that I'll paint a picture to. Yoga is not just a practice. Yoga is a lifestyle. Yoga is not just sexy postures. Yoga is having the courage to take responsibility for what you can control, just the way you think, the way you behave, and the way you act. And that is the place that we can start, is taking responsibility around those things, being honest and transparent with ourselves. What will sustain us even better? What will evolve us? And what is breaking us down and what is disconnecting us? So a desirable future for me would be to see this planet and the environment in a harmonious state, to have less forest being cut down, to have less global disasters and the result of climate change, to see our oceans clean, to see the numbers increasing in the endangered and threatened species, to see less monotony, to see less cookie cutter construction. I see increased innovation. I see increased creativity. I see increased variance and variability. I see tribal ways of living, which doesn't necessarily mean we all live in a village together, but that does mean that we befriend our neighbor. That does mean we act from a place of service and from our hearts. It does mean that we stop projecting our traumas onto others. And in a desirable future, I have so much hope, and I see it. It's happening. People are doing the work. Not everywhere, but some places, all over the place. And it matters. It has an effect. So I see that happening like a domino effect. I see people doing the trauma healing. I see people coming to a state of health and humanity. I don't see zero war. I don't see a warless world. I think that would be far-fetched. And I see less war. I see more communication. And I see leaders amongst the world with which we can trust, with which we can respect, and with which we don't try to run away from, but we feel proud to stand with. And I see adults having the courage to connect with their inner child again, to have more adventure, to experience this world, to travel, to figure out what that looks like for them, but to really experience the world. And when they do, want to be a part of that innovation, want to be a part of that creativity. And yeah, that's what I see.
Beautiful. Amazing. Sign me up.
Yeah, sign me up too.
I have a lot of very similar visions. Specifically when you mentioned about village, I do see us living in, not necessarily, again, also in the physical village-like small locations, but the relationship that we have with one another is like we are living in the village.
Absolutely.
Even though it might be let's say in the digital domain, we organize ourselves in such a way that there's a amount of trust and connection with others as there would
Absolutely.
be in the village. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in a desirable future too, and you've opened my mind to this, is I forgot the piece and it's my resistance, but technology. I'm so curious and I'm so open to what that looks like. I'm quite naive too. But I see us no longer being a victim to technology. I know that's not the vision many of us have when it comes to technology, because many movies like WALL-E, for example, point us to a pretty undesirable future. And in a desirable future, I see us no longer being a victim unto technology, but truly using it as that tool to save ourselves, save the planet, and then build up from there. So that's the one piece I'd like to speak to too. That will be exciting.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
This is a great
This
place
is great.
to wrap up. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is amazing. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.